right, this lesson is going to be about units and measurement. For this lesson, you are going to need your units and measurement guided notes page that looks like this. Let's get started. So first, what you need to know is, what does SI units stand for? The SI stands for Standard International. And so these are the units that all nations on Earth have agreed to use, which simplifies communication between nations. Because as you know, some places use kilometers per hour, and in the United States, we use miles per hour. And so there's a lot of different various ways of communicating units, and these are the ones that everybody uses so that we can have good communication around the world. So what are these standard international units? Now these are all the different base units. There can be other units as well that we'll get to throughout the year, but we're going to just start with these base units here. So the first one that you have is length. So length's unit is meters, and we're filling those in right here on your notes page. Time, of course, is seconds. The amount of a substance is called a mole, kind of like how 12 of something is considered a dozen, or a few things are 3, a couple is 2. An amount of something that we use as a standard unit is actually the mole. That is a really, really, really big number. It's 6 times 10 to the 23rd, and we're going to talk more about what that means in a later lesson. Electric current is in amperes, or you might be more familiar with amps for electricity. Temperature is in kelvins, which it's similar to Celsius, but we'll talk more about what kelvins are as opposed to Celsius in a later lesson. Luminous intensity, which just means like the brightness of a light, is called candelas. So if you are buying light bulbs, you can actually look on the light bulb packaging and it will talk about luminous intensity of that product in candelas. And then we have the mass of a unit, the mass of something is measured in kilograms. And then you can see these are all the different abbreviations for those units as well. Well, why are there so many different systems of measurement in the world? Really, it's the same reason that there's different languages in the world. Different cultures are going to develop different ways of communicating about things based on what works for them. Our English system that has the foot and the inch and a yard, these are things that were actually based on the King of England at some point. I can't remember which king it was. But a foot was actually meant to be the size of his foot, and an inch was meant to be the size of this part of his finger. And so these were things that everybody used to be the same, and then other cultures developed other ways of measuring those things. So it's just different places are going to develop different ways of communicating about things. Now, how do we connect between English and metric? Because really those are the two primary measuring systems in the world that get used the most frequently. The way that we connect at least length is that 1 inch is defined to be exactly 2.54 centimeters. 2.54. So I tried to make these two pictures look as close to the correct scale as possible, where you can see here's 1 inch and it's just a little bit past the 2.5 mark. And so that's the scale. 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters. So let's take a look a little bit more on how an inch ruler divides up those inches. So you're probably familiar already with the inch marks. I would certainly hope that you know those by now. Then I'm sure you can figure out that halfway in between there, that's half of an inch. So this would be half of an inch, 1 inch, 1.5 inches here, 2 inches, and so forth. Now, once we cut those, the half inches in half again, that's where we get the quarters. And if we cut those in half again, those marks are called the eighths. And if we cut those in halves again, the smallest marks that are on this particular ruler are sixteenths. Some rulers might even cut them down into 30 seconds if it's a really, really detailed one. Like you might have seen some measuring tapes that have the 30 seconds marked on there. Now that we have identified those, will you guys label on your page? I want you to label the different measurements that I have listed here. And you can label them just A, B, C, D. You don't have to write the whole number out there so that you're not having to squeeze them in. All right, now let's check your work. So 2 inches, hopefully you got that 2 inches is right here. 1 1/4 inches is going to be a quarter after the 1, so right here. 1/2 of an inch would be right here. 1/4 of an inch right here. This is 7/8 of an inch. Hopefully you didn't look at that and think 1/8. It is 7/8 of an inch. Here is where 1/8 would be. 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, and 7/8 would be right here. 1/8 shy of 1 inch. And then our last one is 1 1/16 inches. And so that would be, here's 1 inch, 1/16 past the 1 inch, right here. All right. Now there are some important conversions that I want you to know for English units, and that is that there are 12 inches in a foot. I think you probably knew that. There are 3 feet in a yard, and there are 5,280 feet in a mile. That one I think might be the trickiest to make sure you remember it exactly, but 5,280 feet in 1 mile. So please go ahead and have those written down under your important English conversions. And then I have a question for you, and that is how many inches are in 1 yard? So see if you can figure out, based on the inches in a foot and how many feet are in a yard, how many inches would be in 1 yard. Oh. What a day. Okay, hopefully we're still doing good here. So there are 3 feet in 1 yard, 12 inches in 1 foot, so that means 12 plus 12 plus 12, or 12 times 3, would give me 36 inches per 1 yard. Yay, so this is that one time when the lights all went out at school? Yeah, you know. Okay. And so now let's talk about metric. So we're looking at a centimeter ruler instead. So what do each of these marks represent? Well, the biggest ones, of course, are the centimeters. And then halfway in between each of those, you have a 1/2 centimeter mark. So that is 1/2 centimeter, 1 centimeter, 1 1/2, 2, 2 1/2, you get it. And then the littlest marks, those are the millimeters. And those are 1/10 of a centimeter. So in between each of these, there's 10 marks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then here's the 10th one. And each of those is 10 millimeters. Each centimeter is 10 millimeters. Now, let's go ahead and label these measurements on this ruler, down towards the bottom. Again, just label A, B, C, D. You don't have to label the actual whole written measurement because then it'll get too crowded in there. Okay, now let's check your work. So A is 6.0 centimeters. That would be right on the 6 mark here. And then we have 37 millimeters. 37 millimeters would be 3.7 centimeters. So that's going to be 7 marks past the 3. So here would be 3.5 right in the middle. So 3.6 and then 3.7 is right here. Then we have 18 millimeters. That's 1.8 centimeters. So that is going to be just 2 millimeters shy of the 2 centimeter mark. Or here is the 10 millimeters, or 1 centimeter. And then we would count, here's 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, and 1.8. or 18 millimeters. Then we have 2.5 centimeters, would be halfway between the 2 and the 3. 4.3 centimeters, that is 3 millimeters past the 4 centimeter mark. So 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. And our last one is 50 millimeters, or exactly 5.0 centimeters, and that would go right here. Okay. Now, some important conversions that you need to know. We've already covered all of these prefixes in class, but the important conversions that you actually need to know, these are the ones that really matter for length. That is that 1 meter is 100 centimeters. It is also 1,000 millimeters, because there are 10 millimeters for every centimeter, so 10 times as many. And then there are 1,000 meters for every 1 kilometer. So knowing that, I would like to know if you can figure out how many centimeters are in 1 kilometer. Okay, so if there's 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer and 100 centimeters in 1 meter, then to find that total, you would do 1,000 times 100, which gives you 100,000 centimeters per kilometer. And that is it for our notes on units and measurement.